that I had this deployment in Afghanistan in 2010, and it was, for all intents and purposes, from a leadership perspective, I think a failure, like on my part. And it wasn't because, there were certain things on that deployment that happened that made it really difficult. But it also wasn't because I wasn't a decent SEAL. Like, I was a sniper. Like, I was decent, with a close quarter, like, maneuver warfare, operationally, tactically. I was good enough to do the job. It wasn't the lack of skill sets. It was just the lack of, like, the ability to deal with people. Like, I didn't know how to deal with cliques. I didn't know how to deal with difficult personalities. I didn't know how to have difficult conversations with people and to do it objectively and candidly and stay emotionally, like, in check. Yep.
Hey, welcome to the 10-8 podcast. We're going to ask you to do something really important for us today. Let's hit the like and subscribe button. It'd really help us. Our latest podcasts are out there. You can find them on YouTube, Spotify, and, of course, the CLES website. We're really excited today. I'm your host. I suppose that's what I am, moderator, sitting in this chair. Chris Chapman, Director for Law Enforcement Standards and Training. We got Dr. Chris Clem, newly promoted Deputy Director Kelvin Sargent. Yes. Hasn't taken a breath since we sat down. A little nervous today. Deputy Director Jason Lawrence, and our very special guest today, Stephen Barrett. And we're going to talk some leadership today. He is the owner of Barrett Strategic Leadership Company. Comes from a very solid background, years of experience, 20-plus years, and the Navy, correct? I'll kind of let you talk about that just a little bit. Yeah. But how about you just take a few minutes and let us know who you are and some experiences that you've had.
No, thanks for having me today, guys. So, I retired after I was in the Navy for 23 years, so I retired in June of 22, so I joined in 99, retired in 22, and spent 21 of those years in the SEAL teams on the East Coast. So
obviously you're leaving out some parts there. So I'll just tell you, Command Senior Chief, correct?
Command Master Chief.
Command Master Chief. Excuse me. So obviously you excelled at your craft. Went up through the ranks and So my last operational tour, I was the Command Master Chief at SEAL Team 4, before that I was the Ops Master Chief, and then I was at the Logistics Unit. I was at SEAL Team 2 for a number of years, SEAL Team 8 for a number of years, and then I was an instructor at the breacher, explosive breacher course that we have for a couple of years too. Yeah, well, I know you hear it a lot, but we obviously try to take the opportunity to appreciate your service.
Absolutely.
So just real quick before we get into the heart of this thing, what led you into the service?
So I was looking at, I was probably a sophomore, junior in high school, and me and a friend of mine, my buddy Shane, we were going to go to Springfield College. So I'm from Massachusetts originally, and we were going to go to Springfield College to get like a sports science degree. And then I looked at the caseload of what the actual requirements were.
Nope.
It was more than just being a gym rat and being able to put together a workout program. So I saw that, and then immediately I was like, I'm not doing this. And this is not for me. So I was looking at the Marine Corps.
Simplify. There we go.
So I was looking at the Marine Corps, and then a friend of mine, my buddy Brian, who is from my hometown, really good friends, he became a SEAL too. He was like, hey, just look at the SEAL teams. And I thought you had to be in the military for like 10 years at that point to like even try out for like a special forces kind of thing. And it's like, no, you can, right out of high school, you can try to be a Navy SEAL.
Wow. So they just started the SF contracts?
They had the SEAL Challenge program contract. So if you passed the physical fitness test, at that point in boot camp. Then you sign the contract prior to joining. Then you get an automatic shot to go to BUDS.
Right.
So that's what I did.
So you're a product of Great Lakes, is that right? Did you go?
Mm-hmm.
Man.
Yeah.
So, of course, the Navy had their base when I was in the Corps at San Diego.
Yeah.
And so they're just
Yeah.
across the water from us. So there was always a little bit of, conversation
Yeah.
back and forth during PT.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It was really when I learned about the SEAL teams when I was like a junior in high school, and I became obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Like 100% obsessed. And it was just wanting to do something like special. I just wanted to kind of stand out and not take, the common path, I guess. And that was it. And I was hooked.
Yeah.
You mentioned you became obsessed. Was it a movie? Was it a book? What drove you at that? Was it Charlie Sheen? I mean,
I'm not gonna lie, I loved the Navy SEALs movie.
great movie.
And the big thing was it wasn't a movie. It was just the concept of it.
I get it.
That was it. Like they had some footage on the Discovery Channel.
Yeah,
of the SEALs
I remember
at that
those.
point, and it's
I
like
remember.
that dude's like talking about the M60. He's like, the gun keeps on shooting and the enemy keeps on dying. I was like, this guy is the man.
This is what I got to do.
Yeah. But in reality, he's probably, I don't know, kind of a tool. But but it was just like, okay, that it just spoke to me,
I get it.
at a visceral level.
Yeah.
And I put all my time and energy, my senior year. I joined when I was 17 in the delayed enlistment program.
Me too. Yeah.
And I knew the path, like for my senior year. So I felt pretty lucky, looking back hindsight, to be that young and have a purpose.
Sure.
And
That's
then
awesome.
have like the work ethic to try to achieve it, which I think is a difficult thing for anybody, regardless of like age or experience, to have that purposeful existence and to get that at a young age in those formidable
Sure.
like years. It was a blessing, like very much so.
So that put you in BUDS. You were pretty young.
Yeah, I was 18
Yeah.
when I went through BUDS, and it was definitely like a boy in a man's world.
Yes, sir.
I was very intimidated. I never thought I was going to make it through BUDS. Like, I wasn't one of those like people that just like, I have no plan B. I was like, I put the SEAL teams on such a pedestal
Get it.
that I was always surprised when I made it through like one phase and then another. Like I always said, when I made it through Hell Week, I said, at least I can tell people when I get drummed out of this program, I made it through Hell Week, because that's a pretty special thing. And
That's a
then,
milestone, yeah.
yeah, and then I was like, well, then I can tell I made it through first phase. And then when I get drummed out, I can say I made it through second phase. And then it wasn't until third phase where I was like, this might actually happen. And I almost thought less of the program when I made it through. The fact that I was like a part of it. The sheer fact that I made it through and I could like be a part of this, like I almost thought less of it. Like that's how high on a pedestal I put it, where it's just like I didn't belong. And I had this massive amount of self-conscious imposter syndrome throughout my whole career.
I get it, man.
Yeah.
And like everything after BUDS has been gravy.
Yeah.
Because I never expected to be a part of the organization anyways. So it's one of those things where I tried not to take it for granted, and it was always very, very special to me that I became a SEAL and I got to wear the trident, and I was like in love with the trident. Like it was so like really beautiful to me. And I was very much like front sight focused throughout my entire career on the SEAL teams, and it was a massive imbalance between, my work life, personal life, and it almost cost me my marriage and my family.
Yes, sir.
And but I was, it was just, I was dedicated to the point of kind of blindness.
Yeah.
But then when you
Yeah.
get out, when I retired, you realize like this was very much a one-way relationship.
Yes.
I'm always expecting like NSW to call me up and be like, "Hey, how you doing?" Or like I call like the SEAL teams like, "Hey,
We're failing because you're not here.
what are you guys doing?" It's like
We just miss you.
it's over, man. like move on. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay. It's like the hot chick like dumping you, and you just kind of can't move on for a little bit.
Well, I'm going to tell off on Jason. He actually slept with his badge the first time
did,
he got
man.
it. He put it on his pillow,
I did,
polished
brother.
it.
I ain't lying.
So,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it was special.
yeah.
And it wasn't like, it was just what it represented.
I get it.
Like you're standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yes,
and
sir.
It's such a cool, privileged thing to be a part of, and it's so unique. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So obviously, that you held those senior leadership roles. You experienced. I would expect that you had great leaders, good leaders, and bad leaders help
Yeah.
shape you.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we're adamant about as a division, working with all 14,000 law enforcement officers across the state, is we wanted to expose them to every tool in the toolbox, right? We want them to put as many tools in the toolbox as possible. So the fact that you're out there teaching leadership with 23, 25 years plus experience, we want to share that today.
Yeah,
So that's really the kind of conversation we want to have is obviously what led you to form the company, to get out into the teaching world. I know we met about 9-10 months ago, kind of just through mutual friends.
Yep.
Kind of have been having this conversation, trying to get you here and kind of spread the word about what you're doing, because we don't own leadership.
Yeah.
And so we want to expose our officers to as many facets as possible for them to take an opportunity of.
Yeah.
So what led you to do this?
I think like the topic of leadership, I find really interesting. Just from the psychological aspect of it, the philosophical aspect of it. Seeing good leadership come to fruition, finding out why really smart people that are capable are not good leaders was interesting to me as to like what is that missing piece. So it's just like, generally speaking, it's just very interesting to me, and people are interesting, and like the behavior of like why people choose to do the things they do is always interesting to me. And at some point in my career, I remember realizing like I was like the okayest Navy SEAL. Like I was never like the great tactician. I could hold my own, but I was surrounded by guys that are just absolute monsters. They were so smart. They were so talented. I went through Green Team in 2010. So it's a selection course to go to development group. And it was like, it reminded me of being back in Buds. And I don't think I had a clean run in the house the entire time I was there. It was always some performance violation that I was committing. It wasn't really safety violations, but I was like leading the pack in performance violations with like wrong verbiage or improper like penetration into the room or like a missed shot. And I'm like working with guys that never had any issues in the house. And it's just like, how are you so calm, cool, and collected in this? Like I was more nervous in Green Team going through that selection process than I was in combat, And, then I'm watching guys that are just performing completely at ease, and it's almost flawless. And I was always like wondering what they had, how are you able to do this so cleanly and so chill? And I am just this like stress ball of self-inflicted, wounds. So you're working with guys that are just absolute masters in the tactical realm, but then they're thrust into a different role in leadership where they have to deal with the human element of the the game. And I was realizing that I was better at leading people than I was at executing the job of being a Navy SEAL in comparison to some of my peers. And I think it really kind of boiled down to, that emotional acuity and emotional intelligence and awareness. And I think I had that skill set and the ability to communicate with others at a real level, more so than some other guys.
So here's what I take away from that. So we always talk about self-reflection. Being a leader is all, you're looking in the mirror every day. How do you make these improvements? But what I picked up there is there was a point in his career where he had to look in the mirror and where am I going to be most productive?
Yeah.
Man, that's a big challenge.
Yeah, I mean, there was that point, and I tell this I've got my leadership class that I built, and it's very personal to me. It's like my baby. It was the first class I built, and I was very nervous about the first time that I delivered it because, this class is me. This is built from my experiences. This is my beliefs. If you don't like the class, then you don't like me. And this might not be
No, I get it.
Dude,
I
can't be
this might not work as a career choice. But thankfully, it kind of hit home. But during the class, there was a point that I had this deployment in Afghanistan in 2010. And it was, for all intents and purposes, from a leadership perspective, I think a failure, on my part. And it wasn't because, there were certain things on that deployment that happened that made it really difficult. But it also wasn't because I wasn't a decent SEAL. I was a sniper. I was decent, with a close quarter, maneuver warfare, operationally, tactically. I was good enough to do the job. It wasn't the lack of skill sets. It was just the lack of, the ability to deal with people. I didn't know how to deal with cliques. I didn't know how to deal with difficult personalities. I didn't know how to have difficult conversations with people and to do it objectively and candidly and stay emotionally in check.
Yep.
I just needed some more time in the oven to bake and mature. But that was the deployment where I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, listen, if you're in the business of leading human beings, then it's a get busy living or get busy dying. Either do the job right and dedicate your life to it, or get out of the way because you're gonna get somebody killed or yourself killed.
Yeah, it's a T-shirt. Do you have that on a T-shirt yet?
No.
Okay. We'll have to talk to our legal counsel in regards to that for our company, sir. Yeah.
The T-shirt.
Yeah.
Trademark that.
I'm just loving this because I wonder how many of us feel that way. Transparently, I've gotten to the point now where if I'm watching a TV show, I was watching a Formula One racing TV show the other day, and it's a series on Formula One racing.
Okay.
And I'm watching it, and I'm constantly looking at it from a leadership perspective.
Yeah.
That's the lens that I find myself, if I'm reading a book, I'm listening to a podcast, and it's not intentional. It's just I'm always looking at how did they lead that team? How did they solve that problem?
Yeah.
You know, and it's weird. It's like those glasses. That's the glasses I look at.
Yeah, and it's also weird in how I don't apply this enough at home.
Yeah, that's why.
That's
that balance.
I am. You only have so much bandwidth, I guess. But I know that I'm talking to classes, and we're talking about how to resolve conflict and how to have a difficult conversation, or where are your own biases, where are your own prejudices, where is your own the stereotypes that you have, how are they polluting the integrity, the objectivity of what you're doing. If you're always looking for a problem, you're going to find it. And I would find myself doing that with my own son, my 14-year-old. I've got 6 kids, and I've got one on the way. We just told the kids the other day.
Congratulations.
We just let the world know.
Yeah.
Or at least 19 people.
Yeah.
Those 19 are so excited.
Yeah. So you 19, I'm expecting something.
Yeah. Send the gift.
Yeah.
but I do the same thing to my son, and it's, you beat yourself up at night when you're lying in bed on like how hypocritical you are. And I don't know. But, there's, there's those things that you look at from a leadership perspective. And, sometimes you wonder when you see poor leadership or poor, like somebody that doesn't have the pulse of their organization say something in a public forum, thinking like this is the right thing to say, and it completely alienates themselves with the entirety of the audience. And it's like, how did you think that was going to land with, what you're, so anyways,
Well, you
I
mentioned.
don't even know what your original question was.
I don't remember.
We're just talking.
Yeah,
about
we're
it.
talking.
You mentioned that 2010 time frame
Yeah.
that you believed that it wasn't a successful tour, correct? So do you believe that we, as leaders, good leaders, we learn from our failures more than we learn from our successes?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So what was your self-reflection back? You talked about you looked in the mirror and did that. What was your, hey, I need to change this?
It was, the biggest thing was just having self-awareness.
Okay.
My thing was I didn't know like who I was from a leadership perspective.
I'm with you.
So I had to figure out,
Wow.
and like it's the thing I teach in the class. It started off, it ended up as a 3-step process.
Okay.
For me, and it was just something that I just started doing because I thought it might work, but I had no idea what I was doing. But the first thing was trying to like figure out who I am. Like, why do I believe what do I believe? Like, what I believe. Why do I value the things that I value? Why am I passionate about certain things? Why am I like agnostic about certain things? Why do I procrastinate on these things, but I'm very proactive with this? I had to like figure out who the hell I was. That was the biggest thing.
It's the self-reflective aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's constantly trying to,
It's knowing your why.
understanding your
Yeah,
why.
I heard that.
yeah.
Why
the big,
am I? Why?
yeah.
Is that why?
If you're in a leadership position and you don't know why you believe what you believe, you're going to be quite incomplete. And I was very, very incomplete. And I had to, what I called, discover the origins of my leadership style. Like,
I'm writing that one down. That's a
it
good
was
one.
okay. The way I was brought up, my God-given talents. Like, what are those? And I had to write it.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the big thing that we don't do often is capture the data and annotate it, because you won't be able to reflect back on it in real time in the future when you want to refer to something. It'll just be this thought or this concept that's lost in the ether. It's like a stand-up comedian, like, coming up with a bit, at 2 a.m. when they wake up. If they don't write it down, you're not going to remember
Sure.
it. So the weaknesses that I had, like the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it was really kind of going through like every persona that I have. And like, I think it was like, who's that? The Swiss psychotherapist, Carl Jung, maybe. Talked about the shadow persona, like that part of you that you don't want to admit that's there.
Yes.
Like you have to uncover that too, like everything, and that's what it started for me. And I wrote it down, and it was just that adage of to know thyself. I had to know me first and foremost, and that's the thing that I tell leaders. Like if you're going through a leadership class, like you have to be selfish in the beginning. You have to focus on you, because if you don't figure yourself out, like you better have your house in order before you start throwing out life lessons to the center. So you got to figure yourself out. And then it was, okay, now that I've done some introspection and self-reflection and I have a bit, better grasp on who I am, now I got to refine that and cultivate it, because I just generated so much emotional raw material and intellectual raw material. And when you develop that raw material, it has to get refined.
Sure.
And then you cultivate it and you build upon it through, thought exercises and introspective questions that challenge, very like existential questions about, why you're doing what you're doing. Like, why do I, like, what is my purpose in life? And then the last part is putting it all into practical application. And then the hard part is making people believe that and, like, trust you and have faith in you and have something that's not tangible and, you know, quantifiable. And it was like 16 months of kind of this, you know, journey of, you know, figuring out who I was. And at the end, I came up with what I called my 3 core tenets. And they were all built from failures, right? Because those failures, they sting so much.
Sure,
you know?
they do.
And the first one was, I'm friendly, but I'm not your friend. I care, but I don't coddle. And if you ever put me in a position that's going to make me question my morals or ethics, you're going to lose every time, kind of thing. And it's all things that I failed on completely that made them really stand out in my head. And I still have, you know, failed on these things going forward, and try to learn from it and, you know, show yourself some grace a little bit. But, you know, you have to figure it out and you have to fix it. But those are kind of like 3 bullet points that seem simple on the surface. Through that year plus of, you know, self-reflection, but nested within each one of those bullet points is a litany of subcontextual data points to kind of explain what the hell I'm talking about. Yeah. So when I'm delivering it to the audience, like, there's some relatability to the new team. And, you know, writing that out was as much of an exercise for me to understand it as it was for the audience that I'm intending to deliver it to. And, you know, that was the first thing I did after that platoon in 2010, 2012 timeframe. I knew I had a subsequent platoon chief tour coming up. And, you know, I made a lot of promises to myself of, like, I'm never going to do this stuff again.
Sure.
I'll do these things better. I'll continue to do these things. But the first thing I did when I got my new team together was I read them the Riot Act. I was like, these are my 3 core tenets. Like, this is what I believe in. Like, this is me giving you some predictability of who you're getting in bed with.
That's awesome.
And I don't really care if you agree with me. Like, ideally, in a perfect world, I would love for you to agree with everything I'm saying. My main point is that you understand and then can accept. If you can't accept, then kick rocks. But, like, this is where I'm planting my flag.
Well, I love the fact that you weren't willing to compromise who you were, right? Look, there's always compromise. We understand that even from the highest level of leadership, there has to be some give and take at times. Yeah. But the fact that you're willing to say, these are my 3 tenets, this is who I am, I'm willing to work with you, lead with you, follow you, you follow me, but here's who I am, and that doesn't change. Yeah, I actually think people crave that level of honesty. I really do.
I agree.
I think they follow leaders that are on. We know from the data that the number one thing that people want out of a leader is integrity and honesty. We know that. Mm-hmm. Plenty of data supports that. So I think that setting that tone and just being completely honest up front, that had to set a pretty good.
Well, it's relatable.
Yeah.
You know, and those 3 core tenets, you know, I don't know if I could ever achieve those, right? Like, that was the ideal version of what I'm trying to, like, what I strive for. But, like, it's almost like work-life balance. People are like, oh, you want to strike a work-life balance. And it's like, if you're a true professional, that's not going to happen. Like, the preponderance of our waking hours are spent with our coworkers. Like, the scales aren't even. But just because you can't necessarily achieve that in a practical form doesn't mean you stop striving for it. Right? It's like implicit trust with the organization you're a part of. Like, will you ever have 100% trust with the organization that you're a part of? Like, probably not. And if you have 80% trust, will that organization survive? Probably, but it'll never thrive. Yeah. But just because you can't necessarily achieve that in real time doesn't mean you'll stop striving for it.
But what happens when you move the needle from 80, let's say we get to 90? Then what's the culture of that organization look like,
and
right? So our leadership journey is constant. Look, I'm 54. I've been doing this for 30 years. My time in the military plus law enforcement, 36. So every day is a journey. Every day
Yeah.
I'm pushing myself to
Yeah.
be better.
Yeah.
And I think when we quit doing that, we become a whole lot less effective.
Yeah, no, I say if you think that you figured it out,
Oh, no.
like it's time for you to go.
Yeah.
I would always get annoyed when I'd see people at work that are walking around happy-go-lucky, you know? And it's like, what are you smiling about kind of thing?
Yeah.
And it's not that like
Don't
from
you
a
know?
pessimistic, cynical standpoint, but
There's still problems to be solved.
like if you are happy-go-lucky, it means you're either not working hard enough or you're missing something. Like we should all have the appropriate amount of stress in ourselves that keep driving us because that means a goal, that means there's something to work for. And if you're content and happy, then that means you're good to go with where you're at in your lot in life. Like I think happiness is, principally like a silly goal to have because it means you've reached the end of the road. Like if you're happy with where you are at and who you are, it means there's nothing left to learn. Like there's no growth. Like it doesn't mean you have to, hate yourself, but it means, you should always be looking for that next thing.
The next target.
And be content in the work that you've done to get to where you are, but not content in like the overall process and, where you currently stand.
One of the things that we do as a team is we challenge each other, and this speaks to your point, is what's our next uncomfortable? Because when we start getting comfortable, right,
Yeah.
it's the same effect.
Yeah.
You start becoming less effective. So we remind each other as a command staff and all the way through our organization is where's your next uncomfortable? If you're comfortable, let's find what pushes you to the next limit.
Yeah.
Momentum's
Stop
big
getting
deal.
comfortable.
Constantly,
Yeah.
pedaling. You're
yeah.
always pedaling. It may sometimes faster, slower, but you're always pedaling.
Yeah. You should, and in a world where it's very cushy, you have to inflict some of that on yourself sometimes.
Good point.
And that, it was easy to do it in the SEAL teams because you're just part of an organization that you didn't have to work very hard to not like what's going on sometimes, right? Because like you're doing a difficult job.
Yep.
And so it was kind of, it was given to you to be uncomfortable. But then when you retire, like when I retired, I kind of lost a little bit of that. And self-discipline is not something that I'm like great with. Like that's why I joined the military. One of the things was I knew like I needed some structure around me. Like left to my own devices, like I probably would have ended up a heroin addict or something, Like I needed some framework and structure around me to help me in my life because I didn't possess, I think, the self-discipline to do things in an academic environment that I needed to do because I was just so disinterested in it and I just didn't gravitate towards it.
So do you believe your career now has given you that self-discipline that you need, or you still,
no, it's made me
still trying?
aware of the fact that I lack self-discipline, and then that awareness drives me to make a choice of, well, you can either do something hard or you can choose to not do something hard. You can be disciplined and do the necessary thing, or you can be comfortable and do what you want. So that it's illuminated that that's a choice to make, and then you're accountable for those choices. Like I started doing ice baths again recently, and you're all full of piss and vinegar doing something difficult, or starting a workout regimen, but then when the novelty wears off, now it's the discipline.
Yeah.
And it's like, will you do it? And that's I look at some people ask like, well, what is a professional to you? And it's like a pro to me is somebody that hates what they're doing, but they knock it out of the park. Like anybody can be a professional and have life fulfillment and professional and personal satisfaction from a job they love. But find somebody doing something they hate but they're absolutely crushing it. Like, that's a pro. Like, that's somebody I want to work with. But if you don't like what you're doing, then hopefully you love who you're doing it with, or hopefully you love why you're doing it. If you don't have at least one of those three, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested on your take on this. I'm going to let Chris take this over, but let's talk about the reason people leave our profession, those numbers, how that relates to leadership, and just I'd love your take on this.
We started doing research because recruiting, resiliency, wellness, all those
retention.
things. Yeah, retention.
Yeah.
Which are factors in law enforcement as well. And military, high-performing organizations tend to have those issues. And so we did research, and basically the research boils down to those issues all relate to a toxic organizational environment. If the environment is toxic, 75% of the responsibility falls on the leadership. 25% is on the individual. They got to be motivated, all those. But the organization holds the lion's share of having a healthy environment.
Setting the tone, building the culture.
Yeah, so all the wellness, resiliency, retention, all those things were related to what kind of environment. If it's the water's boiling all the time, you're going to lose people.
Yeah, those programs are great, but they mean absolutely nothing if the people behind them aren't the right people, you know? And like whatever job you're doing, when I go and teach at Pico, like I love teaching at Pico because there is so much raw horsepower there. And there's so many people there that are oftentimes, I think, dismissed. It's a second chance organization, but some of my best students there are guys that are ex-cons that have been in like a federal prison for 5-6 years, but I watch them during the class and I look at their people skills. I look at them reading body language. I look at them like they have the pulse of what's happening, and they have this, this life experience that really boils down to having, I think, people skills that maybe we don't know how to apply outside a hyper pressurized environment like a prison, but the bones are there, the structure's there, right? But I love teaching there, and one of the things we talk about is like, hey, this is not a dream job for anybody. Like nobody grows up dreaming of like cutting and quartering 150,000 chickens a day, right? So whether it's a job at Pico where you're doing something like that, or whether it's law enforcement or the SEAL teams, like what you're doing will get old eventually. So if you need to fall back on to either I love who I do this with or I love why I do it. And what I've seen out of the 12, 15, 1,600 people that I've taught is most people gravitate towards who they do it with.
The team.
And it's always like the notion of doing another jump or another dive or another training trip got really old after like your 5th, 6th, 7th platoon. But man, I loved who I did it with.
Yeah.
And it was hard for me to go to bed on Sunday night because I was excited to hang out with my friends on Monday morning kind of thing. So if you're looking at doing a job that like law enforcement where, okay, the novelty's worn off and now it's a job. A couple of years ago, it's like the hangover of the defund the police and, the vilification of law enforcement still exists. So you're dealing with all those things, but you also don't relate to who you work with or the leadership. You can't relate to them. They're not a real person, and they've got this Machiavellian like empathy like BS thing they're putting on. Like that's going to make it really difficult to retain people. Yeah. And you want to have it. It just comes down to people. Yeah. It's like if you don't know people, you don't know healthcare. If you don't know people, you don't know law enforcement. You don't know people, you don't know warfare. If you don't know people, you don't know anything. Like we have to figure out that. Yeah. And I think a lot of times you get people that look at, they look at the data. They look at, okay, what's the quantitative data telling us? Well, we're losing this many people of this age range, of this demographic, and this is the reason why. Again, we were kind of talking about, solving problems. And you're looking at it through a very kind of infantile approach of straight line solutions, and everything's linear. And it's like nothing's linear with human beings.
Right.
And we're looking at, this is what's going on. These are the symptoms that are presented. This is the diagnosis. Well, you're not fixing the cause. Like, that's the problem, is you're not identifying the causality of what's happening. And that's going to take a long time. It's going to take long-form discussions like this to kind of get at the nuances and the subjectiveness. And it was one of the things that I talked about, in the teams. I was at they had all the SEAL team command master chiefs and COs. You go to the headquarters at Group 2 every Monday or whatever to have, kind of get the pulse of what's going on. And I forget what was going on. It was like pre-COVID, or maybe COVID just kind of came about. But that was one of the things I brought up. I was like, we're dealing with like some complex issues right now, like people, emotional driven issues. And we need to make time to have these discussions. But we're so task and data saturated that we're focusing on all this other BS when we're missing the point. And I think it takes people just to kind of step out of themselves and like, let's have a real honest conversation.
That's awesome.
Like, you're in a meeting with, if you can't be honest and vulnerable and call people out in a room full of like 8 people, of key leaders, how are you expecting to lead effectively?
Yeah, why are you in that room to begin with then?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Could have been an email kind of deal.
Yeah, it's like, well, there's no cameras on us. Let's have a real conversation about what's going on, kind of thing.
Well, so I think that's why we as a group are so passionate. Like you said, you look at the data, you see there's a problem, and then you go straight to diagnosis without working on the root cause.
Yeah.
And so we realize we have a leadership failure within our profession. And it became really obvious to us probably the third or fourth leadership class that we taught. And so our thought process is this: you're expected to lead day one. Mm-hmm. That in our profession, you're expected to lead day one. When you go answer that call, someone is looking to you to lead them through that situation.
Yeah.
So why are we not developing leaders from the day they join the profession?
Yeah.
And then it progressively, obviously, it's a constant journey. But when we would go into these classes, and especially with our senior supervisors, people that already have the stars, bars, and stripes, right?
Sure.
Well, what's your journey to this point of leadership? How much training did you actually have? Did you have a mentor? Did you receive some sort of training? What level of training did you receive? 15%. 15% is about what we're seeing with ranking officers in our profession that received any formal or informal leadership training before they were given that responsibility.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons we're so passionate about it, and that's one of the reasons we start at the bottom and work our way through the chain of command.
Yeah.
And it was really eye-opening to us.
It has been, and I think one of the principles we talk about is servant leadership.
Yeah.
That's where we start the foundational leadership class is, number one, servant leadership.
Yeah.
Recognizing that it's a new concept for most people. It can sound soft, but a lot of servant leadership is knowing your people, looking out for their welfare. It's not, here's how we take the hill. It's who are you? What are your goals? And it's that a lot of what you're kind of alluding to is some of those things. We have human problems.
Yeah.
And if we go in here and just say, here's some practical traits of make you more effective. Here's how you run a meeting.
Yeah.
Those things are all important, but they're byproducts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it starts with the individuals, right? Mm-hmm. Like, people have to know who they are a little bit.
Yeah.
Have some self-awareness.
What is your
like,
why?
What are you prone to? Like, what's going to set you off? Like, you have to understand who you are. And what I see is a heavy disregard on the psychological aspect of leadership. And to me, it's just all about relationships, right? It's about how you relate to the people in your organization. And you want to surround yourself with people that share what you value and share what you believe, that are, like-minded in that sense, but also we're not, discounting, diversity. And when I say diversity, I'm talking like diversity of thought, diversity of perspective.
Yeah, I don't want clones.
Yeah,
I don't want
no.
a team full of clones.
No.
I want a team that is diverse in our perspective because I want us to challenge each other.
Yeah.
So when you talk about that, I'm picking up on that real quick because, one, I want people that are actually better than I am on my team.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
But I also want Jason to be able to, when we're sitting in that room of 8, right, having these strategic, discussions about where we want to move the organization, and I say something stupid, I want him to challenge me on that.
Yeah, I want to be the dumbest person on my
Every
team,
day.
In
the room.
Like if I'm like the most talented human on the team, there's a glass ceiling. We're not breaking.
Yeah.
So listened to a podcast recently, and I forget who it was, but they mentioned don't ever be the big fish in the little pond. If you are the big fish in the little pond, man, you need to go.
Then your ego's overloaded.
Exactly, because I've arrived. I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
There's no reason to challenge myself and change anymore. He talked about always going to that next pond, so to speak, of, hey, I want to go where I walk in the room and I'm the dumbest in the room. Guess what? Then if I'm a true leader, if I self-reflect, then I'm going to raise my level. I'm going to read more. I'm going to go through the shoot house more. Whatever your areas, the old adage, and I know you get sick of me, and you definitely get sick of me saying this, practice what you suck at.
Yeah.
That's a Clint Smith deal from Thunder Ranch is, hey, we always have a tendency to, I'm good at this. Guess what I'm going to practice on and gravitate to? No, what are you bad at? Go put that effort and energy into those things.
Yeah. And then you have to identify what it is.
Exactly.
At, right?
Exactly.
Like,
Be honest.
Yeah, it's like, okay, and then we did that in the class. We talk about stereotypical traits or skills that leaders have. And there's a list of 10 people or 10 things. And it's like, I don't want to talk about what you're good at. Tell me what you need to work on. Like, what do you suck
absolutely.
on? And a lot of times, like out of the 10, most people select dealing with conflict is something that is very difficult. Delegation is super difficult for some folks. And typically, insurance, coming down to like how to communicate, your vision or whatever, whatever you're trying to talk about. And then we talk about, some tangible steps to kind of fix those things. But first you have to identify what it is you're bad at.
Sure.
And think about it and meditate on it for a little
I
bit.
want to ask you a question because this has recently come up, and we haven't talked about this yet. But I want to know your thoughts on leaders and self-deception. A leader that thinks they're something, but they're not something, and they've literally deceived themselves, apparently.
Their organization doesn't reflect it. They think they...
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I'm starting to encounter some of those.
I bet.
And I've become enthralled with, I think this person really thinks they're good, but the fruit of what's going on is not.
Yeah.
Because we talk about good leaders and bad leaders.
Yeah.
But have you encountered that, and what do you think of that? Because we're talking about knowing ourselves. Sure.
Yeah, no, I think I've seen that before, and I think what I've looked at and identified is people that have those kind of behavior traits or tendencies. How they're behaving now is a culmination of 20 years of conditioning, and at some point, somebody didn't tell them the truth, right? And they just kept kind of believing a lie. And, not only do they think it, but they truly believe it. It's like how they're remembering things, like the memory of what's transpired. And nobody has come in there and be like, you suck at this, or whatever the case is. And I remember we were going through this, a leadership kind of prep course for all the new COs, the commanding officers and commanding master chiefs. And there was an exercise where I think Master Chief Ditmar was running it. And he asked everybody to list out some character traits or behaviors that you think, leadership, CMC or CO should gravitate towards or execute. And everybody's kind of listing off, decisiveness, credibility, whatever, I thought, kind of cookie cutter responses. And I wrote trepidation. And I was like, I wrote trepidation. He's like, well, why'd you write that? And I was like, I've seen too many people walking around that think they know everything.
Yeah.
I treated the job like I had a motorcycle at the time. I treated the job like I treated my bike. I was a novice rider with a certain skill set, but I knew if I got on that thing and I was too cocky about it, I was too careless, I was going to hurt myself and others. So there had to be some trepidation in my heart that every single day when I badged in, like, it was on. And knowing that what I do and what I say could affect somebody coming home or not, or their professional or personal development. If I got cavalier and careless with that approach and I didn't have some fear of failing in my heart, I'm going to end up being a problem. I'm going to put people in danger.
So that speaks exactly to what you're talking about, though. So you're seeing these leaders that are so cavalier, they're not understanding the consequences of their potential mistakes.
Well, and we talk about again, going back to the environment, and we all know it's true. The leader creates the environment. And I wrote something recently, and I just read through it, and I thought, man, that is so true, is that a leader's primary job is to set the culture of an organization, to spread it, share it, defend it, whatever. That's our primary responsibility, and everything else is an outcome of that. But if a leader is self-deceived, what kind of culture are they creating?
So I think, in my opinion, it's two things. I think it goes back to what you said, which I agree with, which is no one's ever told them, or what I call the high school athlete. You know, go back and you think about your high school career, and you made every tackle, you made every shot, you did all the things. You don't remember the bad stuff because you choose not to. So maybe that's part of it. But also something else you said that it might be, that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Somehow I made it here, and I better let everybody know I made it here and I earned it, when they never believe. So they fake it, and they're not strong enough as a leader to self-reflect and self-assess and going, man, I'm screwing this up. I need to have conversation with coaches and mentors in this area, talking to your troops, talking and getting the pulse. We have a philosophy that NCOs run the world. Your corporals and sergeants in law enforcement, master chiefs, y'all run the world.
We had you got a platoon, you got the E5 Mafia.
Yeah, absolutely. we call them the backlot mafia.
Yeah.
So,
but they are the ones who know the pulse. They know their people. They know the things that are going on. And when the good idea fairy shows up and that decision and that policy procedure, man, if you're not getting that buy-in from your troops, those grunts, the boots on the ground, then you're setting yourself up for failure every single time.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that's a big part of it is people that are thrust into positions that there's a massive amount of insecurity, that vulnerability is not something that they think they can exercise.
Sure.
And, any sign of weakness is perceived as incompetence, or you don't belong. Correct. And, you get to a certain rank that, it comes with all the amenities, and you start consciously or subconsciously setting the conditions to maintain that level of authority. And then you can kind of, after that, you just rationalize it however it makes sense, in your head.
You get insecurity, insecure leaders make me nervous.
Interesting. I'd love to delve more into that. And as we are studying and doing that, why do these leaders do it? You mentioned something. You've talked about it a couple times, kind of offhand, but you have this quote on your website, and it says, "Trust drives." I don't have my glasses on. Success.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well,
a great question.
Dave Geyer, he's my communications director, and he was in the Marines for a long time. He came up with that, actually, and that was, born from some shared experiences that, we had in some business ventures. And, when he mentioned it to me, I was like, I love that, because I had a different quote up there, but it's 100% true. Trust does drive success. And I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan.
Yeah, I
and,
love Jordan Peterson.
when he talks about trust and the inversion of trust being betrayal, and how it's the number one thing that an organization needs to consider. But it's so complicated, and so there's so much depth to trust of what builds trust. You can start going down this rabbit hole. Like, we could talk for the next 5 hours on trust alone.
Sure.
But I say, if your body of work, like if you look at yourself as leadership is a 96-story structure, trust is the foundation of that high rise. And if there's cracks and seams, it's going to reverberate up and down. And so you have to have that. So how do you develop, trust well? What I like to break it down to, and what I really foot stomp with the class, is driving. Because I ask the students, I'm like, how are somebody, we talk about, I say, somebody define to me, tell me what trust is. Mm-hmm. And everybody's kind of like a pregnant pause, and you got to think about it. And I was like, it's not easy to articulate what trust is it? They're like, no. You can rationalize it and be like, well, trust is this and trust is that. And fundamentally, trust is an emotion. It's a feeling that you have. It's like love. Yep. And when you're asked to try to explain what love is, like, you got to think about it for a second. So if you can objectively say that trust is the number one thing that an organization needs to have in order to thrive and not just survive, and then acknowledge that fundamentally trust is an emotion and a feeling that you have, typically correlating to demonstrated acts of reliance or reliability, but still reliability and trust are different. Then if we can acknowledge trust as a feeling and an emotion, then we have to acknowledge the role that feelings and emotions play at work.
Right.
And we have to be accountable for that, and we have to account for it. And the big thing I drive home is, like, I'm not talking about like Hands Across America,
right,
and not creating like triggering anybody in safe spaces, but knowing that human beings are complex emotional creatures. Yes. And you have to have emotional awareness and acuity and intelligence to lead those teams, to develop those relationships. And to have a relationship, there's got to be relatability.
Sure.
And if you get relationships developed and feelings developed, because you can't have feelings and emotions with somebody without a relationship, then you get trust, and then you get loyalty. And loyalty is something that you want loyal teammates, and you want loyal bosses. And we talk about what's the difference between a loyal customer and a repeat customer. A repeat customer will go to whoever's giving them the best deal. Right. A loyal customer is somebody that's willing to incur pain and loss, but stay with that organization.
Right.
And they're not staying, for like the symbol, right? They're not staying for a moniker. Mm-hmm. Like, they're staying because I'm staying because of, like, Chris.
The faith in you,
right?
The trust in
it's
you.
Like, I don't have trust in the organization. I have trust in you. You just happen to be, like, my strongest emotional connection to the organization you're a part of. Right. And when you have, I think, leaders that don't take that into account, then you're going to have those seams and gaps, and then you're going to have members of the organization that'll look at it as toxic because, they're not being, their feelings aren't validated, right? Mm-hmm. But it's one of those things where it's a fine line. Like, you can't show a great book. Whoever's listening, go out and get a book called The Character of a Leader. And it's by Donald Alexander. And I reference him in my classes so much because, yes, it covers down, you need to be empathetic and you need to be understanding. There has to be compassion, but there can't be too much, right?
Yeah.
A quote in his book is, too much understanding sends us down the slippery slope of excusing or condoning poor behavior or poor performance. Right?
Well, so think about that.
That's so good.
Yeah, so if you're over-connected, then you're going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a balancing act, and it takes a lot of practice and a lot of failures, and ideally you learn from the failures, but just like like too much like empathizing. Like, if I over empathize with somebody, then I'm giving, credibility and validity to what could be low hanging fruit and whining, right? But if I'm completely agnostic to that empathy, then I could be overlooking something that's true and real. So, like, where's the balance?
That's
Striking that
good.
balance.
That's good.
And the balance comes from, I think, guys like you in the room that you have an extended period of experience under your belt. And typically, people with a lot of experience tend to have a bit better judgment because they've been through the trials and tribulations.
Battle tested.
And when you combine good judgment with a vast body of experience, the byproduct of that is wisdom. And then you take that collective wisdom, and now it's our job to pay it forward and share it with others.
You bet.
And like guys that have been in the job for 25, 30 years, you can't mass produce the experience that you guys have, like you're unicorns. And, it's something like heavy as the head that wears a crown. Like that's a big responsibility I think that we all have, to share what we have learned. And like you said, nobody owns leadership. Like there's no patent on it. And there's nothing new under the sun in any of my classes.
And nor ours.
Right?
Nor ours.
Everything we're talking about, somebody else that's far smarter,
we've
more
already
capable has already figured out.
We're
taking what they have figured out and sharing it with others on how we applied it to our lives in the hopes that others can do the same. That's why I love getting, I had an 18-year-old kid at Pico, and during the leadership class, I'm like, hey, I want you to craft your leadership statement. Like March 14th, 2025, this is what you think of leadership. And it could be character traits. It could be just a feeling on it. But this is like a window into your soul, a little time capsule of what you think about leadership right now, and see how it evolves or devolves over the next 6 to 12 months based off of what is a priority.
So the writing of the why.
Yes.
So we make our cops that we work with write their why down.
Yeah.
Either take this generation, take a picture of it, right? Take a picture of it. Don't put it in your wallet. But we had an employee of ours, a teammate of ours, that actually carried his why for 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he'll unfold it, and you'll see that lines are stricken, additional notes are made.
Yeah.
It changes.
I would make them all write it out longhand.
Yeah.
So we do.
Well,
They're going to
can't.
start doing,
They can't.
They're going to go on Grok or ChatGPT and be like, why do I want to be a coach?
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm feeling that.
Yeah.
Well,
What do you think of
I
this
feel like this has
poetry,
been a therapeutic session
No.
today. So first of all, will you come back? Will you come back and continue this conversation with us?
Yeah, I try to talk at home and none of my kids listen to me.
Dude, you got us, man.
You got us and 19. You got us and 19 others, man.
It might turn into 20.
Yeah, it might turn into 20 if you'll click the follow and
hard
subscribe
enough.
button when you get home today.
My mom has different accounts, and she keeps adding, so that's how we got 19.
But you know what? This is so important. It is absolutely, and there's so much more we need to go into.
Oh,
we could
buddy.
go into.
No, that's why we need to.
Because we're having this, and in my mind, I'm paying attention, and I'm writing, and I'm just thinking of all the different things that are critical.
It's interesting stuff.
It is
complex.
fascinating stuff because it's the future. And as I'm thinking about the leadership side, I'm also thinking about the followership side. Of we have to empower them to ask questions, and we have to have leaders that are willing to do that. Because I want to get this book for sure. Because we don't want to be too empathetic, but we need to. I love what you did. You went in and said, "Here's the core tenets. Boom, 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 boom. Here's the expectation."
Yeah.
That informs them of this is what I'm looking for. But we want to help them do the same thing, so they think about it, and then you create this communication style. All that needs to be discussed.
So we all agree that we have to set the expectations, and I love the
100%.
fact that you did that. But so if you're over empathetic, does it hamper your ability to inspect the expectations because you've gone too far down the rabbit hole? Because I think if you set the expectations, then as a leader you've got to inspect those and hold those people accountable.
Yeah.
But if you're so far down the emotional, empathetic roller coaster,
Yeah, I mean that goes into the trepidation in your heart because, like one of the things is like I care but I don't coddle, but again that we're surrounded by each other every day. Relationships get developed and that's encouraged, but you can never let a subjective or personal relationship start affecting the objectivity of your integrity.
Exactly.
But that's that if you don't think about it, and I've been a victim of this, if you don't keep that in your on your frontal lobe, like you're gonna forget. It's all like it's iterative. It's repetition. You need to do it. And again, it's leadership is tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It like one of the things I talk about. The first thing I say it's really hard work.
Oh,
it's really
absolutely.
difficult.
It's the most
It's
difficult
just
thing I
hard.
think you can do.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's not fun sometimes, and it's lonely, and it requires discipline to do it well. But yeah, like starting them off with their whys, and because the interesting thing that I've noticed when I start writing about certain things is I'll start going down on a certain subject, and then I'll hit on something that I wasn't even considering, and I'm just like, ooh, put a pin in that, come back to that. But there's so many blind spots that get illuminated just through the act and art of writing things down. But you have to kind of sequester yourself away from Wi-Fi and Google and YouTube and Facebook, and set yourself down to do it without distractions. But like the friendly, but I'm not your friend. Like I'm friendly, but I'm not your friend kind of thing. You don't even have to be friendly, but you have to be approachable. Like if I see like Jason, I'm Jason's boss, and Jason's at the other end of the hallway, and he sees me, and we make eye contact, and Jason's like, "Not today."
yeah.
That's a big problem.
You bet.
But to be able to take not being friends, but being friendly, but then expounding upon it and getting more coherent, qualitative statements that make it a bit more refined for me, I had to write it out. Like I had to figure that out, but I couldn't have done it without writing it down. And it's been fun, like building these other classes. Like I just finished building this decision-making class, like how to make high-quality decisions, which is super hard, I think. But building that class out and working with, getting input from other, trusted agents, you learn so much, and it's so it's so much more in depth and complicated than it seems. But oftentimes, when you're in that position, sometimes it doesn't seem like that because it seems intuitive.
Yeah.
Right. It just kind of like happens.
Yeah.
Well, then you got to kind of like, okay, let's reverse engineer why that just happened.
I love the aspect of I'm writing new material, but along the way I'm learning as much as I'm learning more than I'm probably giving.
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of times.
Yeah.
Just like today, I'm sitting here. We're all
it's
we're
like a
making
therapy
notes.
session.
We're
Oh, yeah,
speaking.
I've got a
You're
whole page of
challenging
notes
us,
here.
Yeah.
and causing all of us to self-reflect. Going, man, there's a hole I need to fix that, or that's something that I can understand. So
Yeah.
that's where those conversations come back.
Well, hey guys, I think our production manager over there is waving the flag for today. So Steve, how can they get a hold of you? How can they find you? If our audience, our LEOs across, or our private listeners, private sector listeners, how can they find you and allow you to bring this material to them?
Well, you can get a hold of me at Stephen with a PH, at barrettleadership.com. The website is barrettleadership.com, and I've got six-part class that I teach. The first class we go through is leadership, overarching kind of macro overview on leadership, and that's how the other 6 are built from that. And yeah, that's probably the easiest way, and to line it up.
And for our LEOs out there that are wanting, for our law enforcement officers that are wanting to have that conversation with you, we've already pre-approved and provided credit for those courses.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
So any law enforcement that are going to take your classes are going to get credit with Quest, and that's a huge value.
It is.
But we want to have you back because I think we just scratched the
Oh,
surface.
man. We've
After
done this much.
Yeah, we'll review our notes, and again, we're learners, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it's a constant evolving. Look, leadership is hard. It's probably the most difficult thing that any of us ever chose to do in our lives. It's a constant journey, and I've learned more today than I have in a long time, and so I need to ponder on.
Yeah,
it. I mean, a lot
I've
of
got to
this-
think.
Well, it's
And-
fun, talking, finding spirit animals.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
It's just like you want to
absolutely.
get to a granular level on some of these things that, Yeah, I appreciate being here, and it's been very.
No, we'd
enjoyable.
serious business. We'll have you back. So it's one of our favorite conversations.
Oh,
but
yeah.
hey, so let's wrap it up today. Again, if you're listening or watching, please hit the like and subscribe button.
We need to thank the governor.
Oh, I'm getting there. You think
Okay,
I
I'm
would
just
close
trying to
this
be
out
humble.
without thanking the governor? So, golly, my job might depend on it.
I got this. You go ahead, sir.
Yeah, give him the look. So obviously we want to thank the governor for allowing us to serve in these positions. It's an honor and a privilege, one, to carry the badge. We know we don't have the right to do it, but to sit here and have conversations like this, it's truly a privilege. Our Attorney General for allowing us to build out this production studio and his support, and then Secretary Hager for his leadership in the Department of Public Safety. Our staff on the other side of the cameras over there, they're fantastic. Barbara, Stephanie, and Jonathan, they make it happen. They take the shine off of his head and make his legs look bigger than they are because he refuses to do leg workouts.
I don't wear shorts.
So we're going to wrap it up today from the 10-8 studios. We hope to see everyone soon. So thank you very much.